All right, let's start then. Can I thank you all for being here this evening with us and welcome you all to this lecture on internationalization of the curriculum through virtual exchange. A very special welcome to our guest lecturer, Francesca Helm from the University of Padua. Just a very few brief introductory words. 2020 has been a challenging year, as I think we all know, and it has been a particularly challenging year for those of us who work in internationalization, since physical mobility has become very complicated, and many of our internationalization activities were based, if not entirely, at least partially on physical mobility. So 2020 has really challenged us to look for alternatives. But the whole idea of alternatives to physical mobility is not new, and it doesn't appear with the pandemic. It doesn't appear in this year 2020. But in actual fact, since the end of the last century, since the late 1990s, many experts in internationalization have been expressing the need to look for more inclusive forms of internationalization, not based exclusively or entirely on physical mobility. And then, which is how we give rise to terms such as internationalization at home, internationalization of the curriculum, comprehensive internationalization, and so on, which aim to offer internationalization and the development of international and intercultural competences for all students, whether or not they're able to participate in mobility programs. And of course, as we all know, in Europe, the 20% target of graduates having had a physical mobility experience by this year, 2020, has not been met across the board, which means there are at least 80% of our graduates who have not had an international mobility experience and who need to be offered alternatives, who need to be offered a different, a more inclusive form of internationalization. And that is exactly what we would like to talk about this afternoon. This lecture by Francesca, this presentation by Francesca, is the first in a series of events for our pilot program in the internationalization of the curriculum here at the University of Granada, and an event which, for very obvious reasons, we are sharing with our partners in the ARCUS European University Alliance, of which, of course, Padua is a member, but I believe there are also colleagues from other ARCUS universities, the other members of the Alliance participating also in this event this afternoon. So a very special welcome to all of you. It is a very great pleasure for me to welcome Francesca to Granada, not physically this time, Francesca, next time around, I hope. Francesca is a dear friend, from the Coimbra group, a dear friend from many activities over the years, and she has participated in staff development activities in English as a medium of instruction here at the University of Granada. Francesca is a researcher at the Department of Political Science, Law and International Studies at the University of Padua. And she is also chair of the Education Innovation Working Group of the Coimbra Group. The Coimbra Group is the oldest of the European university networks, founded in 1985. Oops, sorry, I have a little message popping up on my computer screen. I'll just get rid of it before something strange happens. She is also coordinator of the Italian section of Scholars at Risk, which, as you probably know, is a network offering support to academics suffering from persecution, whose academic freedom has been under attack because of their political beliefs, because of their ethnic origin, and so on and so forth. Francesca's research over the last 10 years has focused on intercultural dialogue, virtual exchange, and internationalization of higher education, including, as I've just mentioned, English as a medium of instruction. And she also leads the monitoring and evaluation of the Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange pilot project, which has really come into its own over the past months. I think, Francesca, I know you've been in great demand over the past few months. So it is, as I said, a very, very great pleasure to have you here. As Nacho has said in the chat, if you have questions which occur to you during Francesca's talk, please just write them in the chat, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. So Francesca, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you very, very much for this amazing introduction. I feel very humbled. And thank you for inviting me to Granada, even if it's virtually. It's always a pleasure to be with colleagues and friends in Granada. I'm going to try and sharing my screen. Is that okay? Yeah. So, we have people here. I'm going to talk about internationalization of the curriculum through virtual exchange. And I think Dorothy has already explained a little bit about what internationalization of the curriculum is, what we mean by this. And it is the incorporation of international and intercultural or global dimensions, there's a lot of vocabulary around this, into the content of the curricula, as well as learning outcomes, assessment tasks, teaching methods, and support services of a program of study. And this is from Betty Leask. An internationalized curriculum will engage students with internationally informed research and cultural and linguistic diversity, and purposefully develop their international and intercultural perspectives as global professionals and citizens. Again, what we mean by curriculum, I think, varies in different contexts, and the terminology gets quite complex because there's also internationalization at home, which is seen as any internationally related activity with the exception of outbound student and staff mobility. This is one definition. Another definition of internationalization at home is the purposeful integration of international and intercultural dimensions into the formal and informal curriculum for all students within domestic learning environments. And then we have the wider focus. So I think what we're talking about really is a comprehensive internationalization. Now people are talking more about comprehensive internationalization, which comprises both internationalization of the curriculum and internationalization at home. And the characteristics are that it reaches all students, so not just the mobile students, and should be the starting point of an internationalization strategy. And what we're talking about is it's a tool, it's not an aim, but the focus should be on the learning outcomes. So why are we internationalizing? Why are we internationalizing the curriculum or at home? It's for what we want the students to learn. And this is what we really mustn't lose sight of. Students and also teaching staff, I'd like to add, and also university staff. And what we mean, how it plays out can differ in different disciplines, in different programs. But what researchers believe is that it should be part of the compulsory curriculum. It shouldn't be an optional add-on. It should be a part of integrated into university curricula. And so you can have also internationalization at the local level. Most of our cities do have international people with international experiences and opportunities for interact with many people, and also through reading, through content. There are various tools for internationalization of the curriculum. For example, in certain disciplines, we may talk about comparison of cases from different contexts. We can look at literature from different contexts. We have comparative research. We have guest lecturers, local and foreign guest lecturers. We have incoming students who can make our classroom more international. And we have online collaborations, which again, come in various forms. And I'm going to talk about one specific kind of online collaboration, which is precisely virtual exchange. And just to give an idea of what can be the international learning outcomes, again, across various, not just through virtual exchange, it's often phrased as graduate attributes. The ability, for example, to manage a project involving culturally and linguistically diverse team members. Analyzing the reasons for different approaches to professional practice in different parts of the world. Looking at the reasons, analyzing the cultural foundations of knowledge in a certain discipline, And again, here we have a lot of decolonizing the curriculum. This again, there is a lot of criticism that in Europe we have a very Western Eurocentric approach to all of our disciplines, and this is also a form of internationalization of the curriculum, looking at different areas and how knowledge has been created, looking at the impacts of a global issue on local action, but also analyzing the impact of local action on a global issue. Again, it gets quite complex. English is a local language which has become global. So the connections between local globalisms, global localisms is an interesting area to explore. So why? I mentioned briefly why we might do it. Yesterday, I was in this scientific and academic marathon for Ahmed Reza Jalali, who's the Iranian doctor who has been sentenced to death in Iran. This was part of our Scholars at Risk activity. And what really struck me was Gregory Ciotone, who's from the World Association for Disaster and Emergency Medicine. And what he said is that no longer can public health look at geopolitical borders. Public health must transcend the geopolitical silo mentality, as COVID has shown us. And I would argue not just public health, but everything really needs to transcend these silos. We are interdependent, and we need to be able to cope with this. And we're perhaps not really prepared for this. And so there has been a lot of interest in global competence. And last week, I'm losing a sense of time, earlier this week, in the Coimbra Group event, there was somebody from the OECD speaking, but they have been working for several years on defining global competences, which is seen as the capacity to examine local, global, and intercultural issues, to understand and appreciate the perspectives and worldviews of others, to engage in open, appropriate, and effective interactions with people from different cultures, and to act for collective well-being and sustainable development. And again, I don't need to repeat this because Dorothy already said this before. The idea of international student mobility, it is, and the Commission has come to recognize it, that it is an elite percentage of students who benefit from this. So the objective for 2020 was to reach 20%, and we know that we haven't reached that. But even so, we have the 80 or 90%, or in some cases, more students have mobility. So there is great variation in universities where there is this student mobility. And the European Commission's solution, now they're talking about, again, blended mobility for all. And I'm a little bit skeptical about this because, again, I think, why is it that everybody has to have mobility? Okay, equal opportunities to access, but again, it mustn't be mobility for mobility's sake. We mustn't lose sight of why we are encouraging these international experiences for students. And if the idea is to have a powerful intercultural experience, we can also do this in other ways. And then another reason is in Sweden, I know this word flygskam, which is like flight shaming. So people are becoming, at least in some contexts, problematizing this, increase of air travel, which international student and staff mobility is creating. And obviously, we do have trains, so we could travel on trains, and that is one solution. We could travel less, and we are seeing now that it is possible to do a lot of international collaboration without traveling so much. And I know many of us can't wait to travel again, but I think we will redimension the way we are traveling, perhaps. And again, I wonder whether short-term mobility really is the solution to that. But again, virtual exchange, that also has a carbon footprint. So I don't want to delude you that technology doesn't have a carbon footprint. It does. So now I'm going to go into some examples of what we mean by virtual exchange, because I haven't even brought a definition actually, but I thought I would illustrate what we mean by virtual exchange with some examples of different ways that we can have this activity. So it's the idea of using technology to bring students into contact with one another. So it's the social side, if you like, of mobility, having students in contact, but also collaborating, acquiring intercultural skills, but also perspectives on their syllabus, content, and curricula. And I hope the examples will give you some idea of how we can do this. So we can have different levels. We can have co-designed exchanges where there are educators 2 or even more design courses or a component of their course together, and students collaborate on specific tasks and activities. We can have more loosely networked courses or projects. And what seems to have been gaining ground a lot in recent years is this idea of challenge-based learning involving students in transnational teams working on challenges often related, for example, to the Sustainable Development Goals. So one example that I haven't been familiar with directly, but I found it in the research because there are seem to be missing some examples in the harder sciences, is this educating for sustainability, a cross-continental collaborative interdisciplinary case-based course between Uppsala University and the University of Tokyo in Japan. And this comes from a poster presentation that they made. And I think it gives the idea of how an exchange can be, how it can start. It started with visiting professors teaching in each other's universities. And then through this, beginning to kind of think of more structured collaborations between their courses and also between students. And so they developed this project by using video-linked classrooms, which again, perhaps 2 years ago wasn't so common, but now one of the effects of COVID is that people are more familiar with this kind of video-linked classroom. Also using online group collaboration and shared online video lectures. And it was interdisciplinary as well, which is another reason why I like this. So we had students from engineering, business management, and in Tokyo, they were liberal arts, environmental sciences, humanities, and social sciences. And they were working on case-based challenges. So they had information from the business, these specific challenges, and students were required to collaborate in small teams built across Uppsala and Japan. Another interesting one, which we came across in the Erasmus Virtual Exchange project, was between the University of Portsmouth and a university in Sweden, Jönköping in Sweden, I think. And it has become very relevant because it was about healthcare. And the aims of the project was to develop the ability for interprofessional collaboration in students studying healthcare. So healthcare is a very broad system. The problem they identified is that even within healthcare, professionals have difficulties in talking to other figures within the same system. But they decided to develop a transnational exchange to address this. And so in the 7-week exchange, they decided to exchange knowledge on healthcare systems in the different countries, and also share information about working practices through podcasts, through videos. And then in teams, they developed case studies on interprofessional collaboration in the different national contexts. And this exchange was supported through facilitated dialogue sessions with facilitators who were trained through Erasmus Virtual Exchange, and also reflective learning, I think. And through the experience, we've been talking to the educators who designed this exchange. In explaining their own systems to others, they became much more aware of their own system and what perhaps isn't obvious within one's own healthcare system, within one's own profession, also within one's own education system. And it's not until you have to explain it to somebody else that you actually really explore it and dig deeply, and what you take for granted becomes not so taken for granted. You have to explain it and think about why certain systems exist, for example. And so this was a very interesting project, which then, you know, they have repeated another time, and they are very keen on expanding this education. It actually started before COVID, and but since then, the University of Portsmouth at least has been very interested in developing it further. Another example, I know Dorothy teaches translation, so I brought an example from translation and technical writing. And this is, again, it's a network which has existed for many years, actually, since 1999 to 2000. They've developed this, it's a loose network, and within the network, they developed several virtual exchange projects where we have American students, for example, who have to write technical manuals, their course is technical writing, and then Italian students, for example, or Spanish students have to translate the texts. And so then they also have to interact with the people who wrote the texts in order to understand what it is they're talking about and to produce their translation. So they're also developing the skills that translators need to interact with their clients, which is something that is perhaps neglected in some courses on translation, if you like, or also on technical writing. Another example, I'll bring it because this is a recent thing we've been doing with my colleague, Claudia Padovani, in relation to Scholars at Risk, because Scholars at Risk is part of an international network, and it does these three activities: protection, advocacy, and learning. What the network does is support universities in organizing advocacy seminars with students within the university. And so these are coordinated by Adam Braver in the US, who has worked a lot on advocacy. And Scholars at Risk gives you, when you decide you want to do this seminar, you choose a case of a scholar in prison. And we did this for the first time last semester. And one of the cases we chose was actually Jalali with the students. We decided to focus on Iran, and the students looked at the cases of two Iranian scholars. So they had to research the cases, find information, find out what advocacy work had already been done. But because it had been done through a network and Scholars at Risk coordinates this network, Adam Braver put us in touch with academics and their classes who were running the same advocacy seminars. And so we had guest lecturers from the various universities who also put us in touch with their students who had been doing the advocacy campaigns. So we had lecturers and students from the University of Washington, from the University of Dundee. We met with advocacy organizations such as Amnesty. The students organized webinars. The students from Dundee came to talk at the webinars that we had organized in Padova. And it kind of grew organically in a way through the connection with the network. But our plans for the next advocacy seminar, which we'll run next semester, is we're going to do an Italian networked seminar because several other universities are now interested, but also connecting with other European universities doing advocacy seminars, because each university brings their own expertise. Dundee, they were experts in advocacy techniques, whereas Washington, they were working on the legal basis and human rights. And so it was a real learning experience, both for us as educators, very much so for the students as well. In terms of advocacy, it was much more effective because we really did create a massive network. And the hope is to then make this a blended exchange and be able to go to the European Parliament and actually do some physical advocacy work. I mentioned before, so this, again, it's a form of challenge-based exchange, but these are emerging very much in the fields of business, but also in engineering, in management, and across disciplines. And so the idea is that students are given a specific challenge or problem to work on. They're organized into teams, so ideally transnational and transdisciplinary teams. Some of the large-scale projects actually partner with businesses and organizations which set the challenge for the students to work on, which I suppose was the case with the Scholars at Risk seminar as well. Our challenge was advocating for scholars who are in prison. And I've also seen interesting formats. At the staff week in Padova, somebody from Göttingen, I think, talked about a hackathon. And they had a challenge-based hackathon, so with students working over 24 hours or 36 hours, again, in transnational interdisciplinary teams. Or you can have these exchanges which last over multiple months. Very important, obviously, in any of these activities is having students working in teams with the support of mentors and tutors, and also the design of these exchanges. I've been working with Granada and Poitiers, so this is an exchange led by François Lecellier, who's in our Education Innovation Group, working group of the Coimbra Group. And here we have a small group of students. This is a pilot project we've just started, and they're working in Minecraft, which is something François uses in his own courses to teach students project management skills. And what they've been doing, we've expanded this, so it's become a kind of transnational exchange where students are designing their ideal learning spaces. Again, another theme that we work on in the Coimbra group. And so they've been coming into Minecraft. My students, I have 3 students doing it, and they had no experience of Minecraft before. And they said the students in Poitiers have been very collaborative and helping them learn how to use Minecraft. And they've been designing these spaces. The NICE program was another exchange that involved 4 Coimbra Group universities and 4 other universities. And this was actually funded by a Key Action project, and Padova was a partner in this. And again, it was organized around challenges. So the students chose a specific challenge, then they were organized into small groups of 5. All of the students went through these online modules in intercultural competence and also entrepreneurship. So that as they were going through these modules individually, at the same time, they were working in small groups. And every week or every 2 weeks, they had meetings regularly, because together they had to elaborate a solution to the problem that they were facing. And it was supposed to be a blended exchange. I think in the first year of the project, the students did actually meet. This year they were supposed to meet in Salamanca, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But they did organize a kind of a virtual summer school, if you like. So again, this is a networked, challenge-based virtual exchange. It took a lot of work from all of the universities, and it was funded externally by the European Commission. And they also became involved in Erasmus Virtual Exchange because we supported them with the trained facilitators again. Now the project has ended, so I think the consortium are discussing how to move forward with this, but the materials should be made freely available on Creative Commons licenses. And again, this is another project in business which was developed by a university in Sweden, I think. And again, here they partner with businesses, and I think it's funded by businesses. So there's a very low cost for universities, and their professors with their students can apply to take part in these teams. And it has grown massively as a project in just a few years. And again, this is the last example, I think, is from the Erasmus Virtual Exchange project, and it was the big climate movement developed by one of the consortium partners. And as Dorothy said, Erasmus Virtual Exchange really grew in the 3 years. So the pilot project is now coming to an end, and we don't know how it will continue in the future. But in the first year of the project in 2018, we were offering these programs, which were freely available to universities. You know, they could have students take part. And we actually had difficulties trying to get universities to involve students in the projects because it seemed to be such an alien concept. They didn't understand how students could get involved, and you know, people were being offered something for free. What was it? In the last, it's just finished today, actually, the final iteration of the project. And over 1,000 students were involved in hundreds of small groups with the support of facilitators. So I'm looking forward to reading the feedback from the students on that. But I've had students participating, and they find it a really exciting, engaging project. And again, this is one of the many ready-made exchanges, if you like, that were available. It lasted 9 weeks, and there was a lot of work. Students had 2 to 4 hours of preparation by watching videos. They had to take part in the 2-hour video conferencing session, and they also had to write reflective papers, interview people. So the equivalent of a course. And I know at Granada, this is recognized for some of the students. So lots of nice activities. It seems too good to be true, but of course there are challenges. So collaboration takes time, takes planning, it takes coordination, which is often not recognized. Educators in developing their own exchanges need support, training, community, technical help. And, you know, at this time, we were having a discussion earlier today, they're overwhelmed. I mean, educators are exhausted. Teaching online takes a lot more work. And you know, we have also, we're working and living in this difficult situation. So I think we've also found through Erasmus Virtual Exchange, the educators developing their own exchanges again, it has taken time. So they follow the training, then they look for a partner, they find a partner, they might lose the partner. It's complex, it takes time, and it needs support. Because also student activities and interactions need to be planned. The students need to be supported, and the exchange should be integrated into course design and also assessment. And this requires work, and it's also risky. It can be messy. The results aren't always predictable. Partnerships break down. So yeah, it's not easy. And intentional design is important. So intercultural learning doesn't happen. Students won't interact with each other just if you put them in touch. Activities need to be planned for them, but they also need to have time to engage and get to know each other. And here I do think that the support of facilitators in this has proved very useful. So it's a complex activity. It presents challenges, but it is also very rewarding. And I'd like to say here, for example, I don't know if any of you were at the Staff Week in Padova, but Tom Gorman was our keynote speaker, and he talked about Telepresence, a theatre project that he's done at the University of Coventry. And he told me just last week that they were awarded the Guardian Award for Internationalization of Higher Education. So he was very proud of that, and this has ensured him that the project will last at least next year as well. Educators have been writing up their exchanges in a book I edited with a colleague, Anna Bevan, on designing and implementing virtual exchange, a collection of case studies. So this book was a response to the perceived need of educators for case studies, so they could see and understand what virtual exchange actually feels like, if you like. And we edited this collection. But virtual exchange can also lead to new research partnerships. It can lead to publications. It can lead to new projects. On the right, why I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all. This is Marta Roldo, who is the educator who developed the virtual exchange in health sciences, and she was featured in an article on her university newspaper, for example, on her university blog, sorry. We have the International Virtual Exchange Conference, which is an annual event in the US one year and in Europe another year, and this has grown massively. Next year is going to be in New York if things happen. And then through the Erasmus Virtual Exchange project, we had developed a recognition system with badges for educators, but also for students. So it does have challenges, but it is also rewarding. And a lot of the work I have been doing with is obviously thanks to colleagues in Uni Collaboration, which is an organization we established after a European project many years ago. Again, where we have resources for educators and a journal of virtual exchange and professional development. So I think I'll stop here. I do have some resources which I will share with you, Dorothy. They can be also shared with staff. There are some links to networks and resources, and an invitation which perhaps I'll share afterwards.